come now to another most interesting passage. Here we see Solomon getting what many men and women would love to have today: high esteem and recognition from their peers. That's what the Oscars in Hollywood and other similar events are all about. That's what being chosen valedictorian at your graduation is all about. That's what getting various medals of honor from a head of state at a special ceremony are all about. And that's what Solomon got in this passage from no less a peer than the Queen of Sheba. Hi, I'm Ken Godevanis, and this is Digging for Scriptural Gems. Thank you for joining us again today as we study 1 Kings chapter 10, verses 1 to 13. May I suggest that you stop the video briefly and read the passage yourself before we dig into it. Our text starts off by telling us that a certain royal figure had heard about the fame of Solomon. In particular, the text says his fame, quote, concerning the name of the Lord, had been known widely. Some editors would omit this phrase. Others say if it is to be kept, that is, concerning the name of the Lord, it should be translated for the reputation of the Lord. And so she came to test him. The NET version says to challenge him with difficult questions. She came at a time when Solomon and Israel were at their material zenith. The great prosperity, the splendor, and the wisdom of Solomon's kingdom were internationally famous. The Queen of Sheba appears in the religious texts sacred to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. She's described in the Bible as simply a queen of the East. Modern scholars believe she came from the kingdom of Axum, A-X-U-M, in Ethiopia, or the kingdom of Saba in Yemen, or both. Sheba, according to commentator David Guzik, was where modern-day Yemen is today, southern Arabia. We know from geography this was a wealthy kingdom with much gold, spices, and precious woods. History also tells us that they were known to have queens as well as kings. And we also know that this was a long trip, up to 1,500 miles, 2,400 kilometers, approximately the distance from Buffalo, New York to Key West, Florida. Think of that much travel in those days. We note that Queen of Sheba's interest in Solomon's wisdom involved his thinking regarding the Lord. Also, to my knowledge, we have no record of what her difficult questions to him may have been. As I read St. Augustine's City of God and learn about the various questions he had to answer concerning God that came from unbelievers, many of whom got their ideas from philosophers like Plato about God, I wonder if the Queen of Sheba was asking similar questions, as she likely was quite familiar with the various philosophies of her time. She comes to Jerusalem with a large retinue. Retinue is an interesting word here. Its meaning includes a group of advisors or assistants and others accompanying an important person. Hopefully, she was going to turn to them with the answers that Solomon gave her to see if they could make any sense of them. The NET says she came with a great display of pomp, but she also came bearing gifts. Camels carrying spices, or perhaps it was balsam oil. And the text says, quote, very much gold and precious stones. And verse 2 ends by telling us she spoke with Solomon about all that was in her heart. Verse 3 tells us Solomon answered all her questions and then makes the statement that, quote, nothing was hidden from the king, end of quote. And subsequently, quote, he explained it all to her, end of quote. the NET cuts to the chase and says there was no question too complex for the king. There's also a possibility that this whole interview was all about riddles that she had posed to Solomon, and he was able to solve them all. One commentator, Wiseman, says the questions, quote, included difficult diplomatic and ethical questions. The test was not an academic exercise, but to see if he would be a trustworthy business party and a reliable ally capable of giving help, end of quote. And then the Queen of Sheba, having perceived how wise Solomon was, observes all that he had and how he ran things. The house he had built, the food he ate, where his servants sat, his waiters who attended on him, how they were dressed, his cupbearers, and the stairway he used to ascend to the temple, which the NAT translates as the burnt offerings that he made. She didn't miss a thing. The text ends by saying, there was no more spirit or breath left in her. Or to put it another way, she was amazed. She told Solomon she had now verified the report she had heard about his words and his wisdom, and how she had to come and see for herself before she actually believed it. And now that she had, she realizes that only half had been told her, as she found him even wiser and more prosperous than what she had been told. She then identifies some of the blessings of Solomon, which by his demeanor were a blessing to others. She talks about how blessed his men and servants were who could listen to his wisdom continually. And she commented on how delighted God must have been with him and made him king because of God's love for Israel, so that Solomon could carry out justice and righteousness. She said, according to the NAT, God is to be praised. And then she gave Solomon 120 talents of gold, a great number of spices and precious stones, more spices than Solomon would ever receive again. Then the text switches back for a moment to Hiram's ships that had brought gold from Ophir, we talked about last time, and adds that they also brought about many almug, A-L-M-U-G trees, a variety of sandalwood. Solomon used these to make the supports, or possibly the banisters or parapets, railings or steps for the temple and his own house, and also to make lyres and harps for the singers. And then we never hear about almug trees again anywhere. Finally, our passage ends in verse 13, telling us that Solomon in return gave the Queen of Sheba all her desire that she requested, over and above what he had freely offered her out of his royal bounty before she and her entourage returned to their land. Let's quickly look at some takeaways. There's no doubt that peer recognition is a nice thing to receive, but hopefully it will be based on our life as testimony to something just and righteous and helpful, not hurtful to society. Although we should not pursue fame, many today get it to some extent simply by being on social media. However, what we should be known for is God's blessing upon us and our use of those blessings in giving him glory. I still have the privilege this day of having folks or churches come to me asking for advice. Some of the situations they face are very complex, and there's no easy answer. All I can do is ask God for his wisdom and for his help in allowing me to see what needs to be said or recommended. And amazingly, God responds positively. Sometimes afterwards, I just sit down and marvel at how God did that through someone like me. Finally, when I think of this story, I realize that while she politely, Queen of Sheba, politely or in a politically correct manner, she indicated God was to be praised, we actually have no record of her becoming a believer in the God of Solomon. She reminds me a bit of King Agrippa in Acts chapter 26. The Apostle Paul preached Christ to King Agrippa during his hearing before being sent to Rome and appealed to Caesar. Paul was so persuasive that the king told Paul, quote, almost thou persuadest me to be a Christian. But he never, to our knowledge, became one. I would much rather the Queen of Sheba had been, after hearing Solomon out, been more like the Ethiopian eunuch who in Acts chapter 8 said to Philip, who was helping him understand the scriptures, he said, "See, here is water. What prevents me from being baptized?" And then we see him getting baptized. Again, Solomon and Paul did their job with the Queen and Agrippa, respectively, as did Philip, but the results were up to God. Let's make sure we do our job every time we are given the opportunity. And better still, let's actively work at being observant for those opportunities. Next time, we'll dig deeper into Solomon's blessings. Join us for that. In the meantime, I would ask that if you like what you're hearing and seeing, please indicate so on the video you're watching on the YouTube page. Also, if you haven't already, many of you have, but some of you have not, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Digging for Scriptural Gems. But above all, be blessed by doing your own Bible study and doing it often. Till next time.